what is it that you want to do cover?
I'm curious on how you start somebody.
Oh, well, uh, if it's like a new student, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it depends. I ask them, first of all, I want to find out why they're here.
right.
And usually I'll ask them if they have any idea of where their head is and how it meets their body. And the majority of people, it's never occurred to them. To,
Right.
so I get them to map that. Where is the head in relation to the neck, and where does the movement take place from? Because no one knows that. I mean, they all point to the back of their neck or something like that, right?
Right.
So I don't think we need to do that, do we? Do you? Yeah, yeah. So
No, I don't need to do that.
and then I you usually ask them if they have any idea what sits bones are about and if they can sense them, and just
Uh-huh.
get them to explore moving around their sits bones, front to back, side to side. Um, just because it's a little bit of body mapping. That's most of the body mapping I do for a while, but just because that's pretty important. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I'm gonna
I
write that
mean,
down.
um, what do I do next? Well, it depends on what it was they came for. I mean, if they're a singer or voice is the issue, I get them to sing or read something. If it's
Uh-huh.
if they're on the computer a lot, have back pain, I try to get them to set up the camera so they can see themselves usually from the side. What do they do when they use the keyboard? And,
So, okay, so you look at them when they're typing.
well, yeah, because that if they're in pain
Mm-hmm.
because they feel like they're in pain because they were spending a lot of time at the computer, I figured they might as well find out what they're doing when they're typing. And looking people, I mean, a lot of people tend to push their head towards the screen, or sometimes when they move their arms to the keyboard, they do something weird with their shoulders. I mean, I have no idea what to expect from most people.
Right.
You never know what someone.
So then you proceed to correct them.
Oh, I don't correct people.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
you
I
suggest
just I
maybe that
yeah, I just
things would
point
go
out.
easier for them if they.
Yeah, one of the reasons I record these in lessons is that I want them to see it. And a lot of people have never seen themselves from the side.
Right.
So it's quite a revelation. Or they may have seen it like when they're trying on some clothes in a store.
Mhm.
But most people really have no idea what's going on front to back, you might say, or sideways view of themselves. Um, and well, I mean, I,
So this
I
is
try
really
to get to what's that?
basically how one would do a lesson hands-on, how one would start.
Well, these are all hands-off lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah. Right. And um, I mean, different people have very different reasons for coming, and so sometimes um, that need is so paramount that it seems crazy not to address it pretty quickly, at least,
Mhm.
get started on it a little bit because sometimes they're in a lot of pain. sometimes they can't sit in a chair,
Right.
So okay, so can't
Uh-huh.
do that right now, but um so yeah, and the other thing, so usually that little body mapping bit takes up a good part of a first session because it is pretty
How long are your sessions?
officially 30 minutes,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
but I always go over pretty much.
Yeah.
Uh,
But that's good. That's good.
yeah, yeah. And then the the only other time in the early stages, let's say that I would do some body mapping is usually second lesson, oh, maybe the third, depending on, again, what's going on. I get them to map their shoulder girdle. And, I get them to find these joints and get them to move their arms up and down, knowing there's movement in this area. Because most people think that the only joints that are relevant are here, somewhere in here. Most people have no idea that there are joints here. I've hardly ever met anyone who knew that unless they'd read some stuff. And
Yeah.
let me
Uh-huh.
just get my skeleton here. This is where a skeleton really comes in handy.
Yeah. You
Guys,
have the little tiny one. I think you can't get them anymore.
can't get these, no. But I have them
But
find
I
the
have one. I have a
clavicle.
bigger one.
No, I don't have a bigger one.
Yeah, it's like that.
Oh, yeah, you can do it on a bigger one. It's really convenient to do it like this. But I get them, they've run their fingers along their
Mhm.
clavicle so till the clavicle comes to a bump, to find where these joints are. And then I show them what happens if you take a look at this, when they're lifting their arms,
Mhm.
look at all that movement. And most people are pretty blown away by that.
Oh yeah.
They had no idea there's movement here. And not only I also point out that those two places here are pretty much the only place where their shoulder girdle attaches to their torso. Now, that's not 100% true, but it's about 95% true. This is the place, right?
Mhm.
And so it's if that's where the place is and there's movement there in this region, I kind of say, don't worry about the details, but
Mhm.
that this little area here is moving whenever you're moving your arms. Even if it's just moving your arms forward to get to a keyboard, there's going to be some movement here. I get them to explore doing that activity with the knowledge that there is movement here. Now, a lot of them want to get really into the weeds about what kind of movement it is. And, I say it's kind of like these are kind of like ball and socket joints, but they're very shallow sockets. They're not technically ball and socket joint. But I say, well, don't worry about anything about it other than the fact that there's movement. And just knowing that as they move their arms. So, for example, I might ask them to raise, before I even get to that, I might ask them to raise their arms as high as they can do without any strain. They're not trying to reach the ceiling, but just what's a comfortable range.
Mhm.
Then do the same thing, but just knowing there's movement here. And always, I virtually never had anyone that didn't notice their arms got a lot higher. Also, when I'm mapping the head and neck, I get them to actually rotate their head sideways, just the way they normally do, and
Yeah.
then map it, and then do it again. And usually there's more movement. Same thing with up and down movements. I talk a little bit about C1 and C2 because they're really important to know because they are such weird vertebrae, you know.
Mhm. They
Uh,
are. Yeah.
I mean, they are the weirdest vertebrae of all.
Yeah,
So it's good to know about it because
I think
they're
so.
weird for a purpose. I mean, they're very, one of them is helping guide this movement, and one of them is helping guide this movement. That's so it's good to know that. And the reason I get here pretty quickly is that after we've done that, and I say, well, now you were doing that thinking, knowing that there was movement here, right? Um, Maybe you could do the same thing and just know that whatever movement is happening here, which you don't need to know anything about the details, that you could just think the movement is free.
Yep.
And that leads directly to directions.
Right.
Freedom, well, in this case, freedom directions.
Right. Right.
But then, then you can, yeah.
Mhm.
So that's why I do that early, because for most people, it's so easy to get them to, I mean, it's not always instantaneously easy, but it's generally pretty easy to get them to notice that and just notice the difference.
Yeah, I mean, they have no clue about their bodies.
Well, no one has any clue. I mean,
Right.
for the most part, in terms of their own anatomy is a mystery to them.
Mhm.
It certainly was to me when I went to Alexander School.
Oh, I was clueless.
I had no idea. Anyway, so I do that. And
Mhm.
then I gradually say, well, if this area is free and that's helped you, maybe you could expand it to the whole upper half of your torso. And maybe you could expand it to your whole torso. And maybe you could expand it to your whole body. So that can go pretty quickly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then again, the things I'm talking about are what I would do with most people, but a lot of people, there's going to be little sidelines because they have some specific issue that's pressing. And if it's useful, I'll go into that too. But that's how I get them to start exploring freedom directions. And I might just get them walking right away and using those directions as they walk.
Yeah.
Now, what I do with directions in general is I tell students it's really important that this is working. You don't want to believe me. You want to actually know for yourself that um, that it's useful. And the way I've found works the best, it's a little tricky. It takes a little time to get people into this way of thinking, but I say, well, you could, like, say with walking, because I think walking is a great activity to start with
Agree.
for people.
Mhm.
And some people have really cramped apartments. It's hard to find a place. Some people have fantastic,
Mhm.
place. But I say everything I do talk about now, you could do outdoors, on a sidewalk or you walk
Sure.
in your house or whatever.
Sure.
Um, I um, I I I say, well, if you're walking, let's say you have some place where you can walk a reasonable distance, um, that I get them to start exploring walking using the, the thought, I'm free, and then shifting over to a nonsense thought. And I tend to use colors like I'm green. I'm blue, I'm
Oh,
purple,
yeah.
it doesn't matter. The
Mhm.
point is, it's a thought that is not going to affect anything,
Mhm.
right? And they switch over for a few steps and switch back to the direction. And sometimes people say, "Oh, it's a very tiny difference." And I say, "Well, wait, because first of all, tiny is important, but also." Um, it may be less tiny than you think. And I get them to focus a little bit on how their feet are contacting the ground as kind of a way of
Mhm.
getting information. And I usually urge people to have available for lessons and to explore walking with some hard sole shoes.
Mhm.
And if they have in their house, if they have an area with wood floors, that would be an optimal place to explore, or tiles, or outside on pavement,
Mhm.
something that would give them some sound feedback, some auditory feedback, because that's where it becomes really clear that walking with direction, your feet are coming down more softly. But what they know is that they're coming down with less noise, which is less
Mhm.
pressure, right?
Mhm.
And so I tell them that any directions, I'll discuss a bunch of other directions as we go along, but for all of them, you want to test them for yourself, and you can employ that device. The reason I have them think a nonsense thought is that I found that to tell them just to throw the thought away is tricky. It's much easier to get them to actually go to another thought that's a nonsense thought.
Mhm. Mhm.
I learned that, well, in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. It took me a while to really get that. But anyway, so I do that, and then I introduce them as time goes on to paradoxical directions.
What'd you say?
I introduce them to paradoxical directions.
Paradoxical?
Yeah, I say, oh, when you're walking, just think I'm not walking.
Oh,
Yeah. Um,
like I'm not thinking.
well, that's the pinnacle of that pyramid, you might say.
I would think so.
I don't start them with that because
No.
that would be so far out that
Yeah.
it
No,
would
no.
be almost too much.
I
But
agree.
just well, walking is such a good one because most people are doing some walking during the day anyway. Why not use that as a
Oh, absolutely.
place to learn stuff?
Yeah, I always had walking in my every lesson I taught,
Yeah, yeah, no,
just about.
yeah.
And so yeah, that's great. I hadn't thought of using a nonsense direction and flipping it, to see what the difference might bring.
The other thing that's really helpful early on is if they do notice that things are easier when they think a direction,
Mm.
especially let's say it's a direction like maybe a negative direct, or it could be free, it could be a direction involving the neck, right? So my neck is free, right? Or if it's um, yeah, my neck is free, for example. And they'll notice again when they're using that with walking that there's more pressure. And I point out to them that all they've done is think a thought about up here and it's affected their feet, which, there's no direct connection from here to your feet. It has to travel through your whole body to get to your feet. And that that that's something I say, this is something you should ponder for a while on your own, because it does get them into the mode of thinking about the whole body is doing stuff. It's not just one little part, you know.
Right,
So
right.
do that. And then and some people, negative directions can be a little tricky for some people. And so, if they really can't deal with it, then we just stay with freedom directions. And
Who started? Was it Missy Vineyard who started
Missy
using?
Vineyards, yeah, and she was the one who really got that going. And it's in her book, this whole section. She said, you could lie on the table and think I'm not lying on the table,
Mhm,
stuff like
mhm.
that. And um, a lot of people in the Alexander world noticed that and started using it. I mean, she really was onto something. The thing that was sort of interesting, though, odd about it, was that she never really followed up on any of it. She seemed it seemed like she dropped that little bomb on the Alexander
It's
world,
pretty wild.
and then she sort of disappeared. You don't really hear much from her. But anyway, but she was the one. Yeah, it was fantastic. Just like Jennifer Roy Frank
Right.
Lee for Freedom Directions.
Mhm.
She's the one who came up with that. The only direction I claim any credit for, I used to say the direction I'm not doing was my idea, but it turns out on closer reading of Missy's book, she actually has pretty much
Ah,
the exact same direction.
got it.
But the I'm not thinking, which you don't want to necessarily bring out in the first couple of lessons, but that to me is the most powerful direction of all.
For me, it's amazing. So I
Yeah,
agree
I mean,
totally.
and I think it's because it's if there's moving, if there's some doing, there's going to have to be some thinking that comes first of some sort,
Uh,
and so why not just nip it in the bud and go directly to I'm not thinking.
mhm,
Again, use a nonsense direction to test it and so on.
mhm.
The only exception, the only other thing, this is getting very technical, but maybe people watching this, maybe we'll post this, right? On Facebook, is the direction I'm not breathing, which is this, a classic paradoxical direction.
Mhm.
You have to be really clear. You have to be careful with that because some people have issues around people strangling them or something. You don't want to just jump right into.
Yeah, well, I have issues about that because then I remind myself that I have been breathing all along.
Yeah, but
And
some
how am I going
people,
to get it out of my head? Then
yeah,
I start thinking about my breathing when I don't want to think about my breathing.
right. Well,
Oh,
some people have had traumatic experiences, and that the idea of, or they might interpret what you're saying as I'm stopping breathing.
right.
I explain ahead of time is definitely not what this direction
Mhm.
is. It's just I'm not breathing the way I normally do. Figure out the unconscious part of my brain and nervous system, figure out a better way. That's the other thing that's really important, I think, and I bring this in early, usually second or third lesson, that there's this part of your brain that's like above your eyes, the prefrontal cortex. It's a pretty small part of your total brain, and it's a very small part of your total nervous system that includes your spinal cord and all the nerves that go out to everywhere. Um, that's the conscious brain. That's the brain that comes up with ideas and strategies, but it is not designed to implement anything. It's just designed to think and maybe put out to the rest of you, that's what I want. But you don't want to start getting your brain involved in actually trying to do stuff
Right.
because it can't do it. It doesn't have the ability. Most neuroscientists will say somewhere around 5 or 6 plus or minus 2 things that it can have going at any one time. And I've seen recently the numbers are a little lower, like four things that it can usefully engage with at any one time. And some of that's taken up with just making sure you don't trip over furniture and stuff like that. It's not all available for you to use to improve
Mhm.
yourself. And then the rest of your brain, which is big compared to the prefrontal, and the spinal column, which is all nerves, and then everything else, that part of you loves implementing. It immediately it almost like leaps for joy when you say something like that. That's exactly what it wants to do. It's odd. It really isn't capable or doesn't want to, maybe. It doesn't want to do it on its own. It wants to be told what to do. It's kind of weird. But like with walking, for example, if you think I'm not walking, meaning, okay, rest of your body, um, come up with a different way. That's what you're saying. Different. You're not saying better, you're just saying different. So logically, you might think, well, you know, it could it could say, okay, I got a way for you to walk that's a lot worse than the way you're walking now. And that would be in total, it wouldn't be violating what you say. It would be a direct answer to what you said. But it never ever does that. And that is one of the most interesting phenomenon of all from my point of view.
Mhm.
Because once you understand that it's not, you don't have to worry about it, worrying about, if you say I'm thinking, making your thinking worse or making you think worse thoughts. It's always gonna go for the improvement. It never happens. And what that means is that whatever improvement you want is already potentially there. You just have to ask for it in the right way. And so
That's the key.
to me, that it's the key, and it's the key that it's not like it's the key that Alexander himself understood. You can read the accounts of his diary of George Trevelyan on the first training course, and Alexander says, none of my students will believe all they have to do is think the thought, and that'll do the trick. They're all slaves to their muscles. And all of the first generation teachers said not the exact, they didn't phrase it the same way, but they all said the same thing, that you don't want to be implementing directions. The way to make a direction work well is just to put it out there with ideally, no interest in what's going to happen.
Mhm.
Be surprised. No plans for it. Just, hey, I'm not walking when you're walking, or I'm not climbing the stairs when you're climbing the stairs. And they all come at it from slightly different angles, but they're all saying exactly the same thing. And it's kind of interesting.
I mean, it's one thing for me to give directions to myself,
Mhm.
um, but I'm absolutely fascinated to give them to a student who is totally unaware, to see what happens.
See, people who describe the Alexander technique often talk about how it helps people become more aware and stuff like that. And it does. But, you know, you don't have to be all that aware to use directions. You just have to put the direction out. You, you know, it doesn't,
Yeah.
if you really just put the direction out there without any expectation or even any interest in what's going to happen,